Welcome to the Jersey Justice Podcast, featuring your hosts, attorneys Gerald Clark and Mark Morris.
Norberto Garcia, thanks so much for coming on. You're the president of the New Jersey State Bar Association. Sometimes I don't know how you guys do it, presidents of the bars and all this stuff, because, you know, I've served on some boards and I've done some of that stuff, but nothing close to what you've done. And I feel like I don't have time sometimes to use the bathroom, much less practice law and do that.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
And it is a lot of time.
Yeah.
I was having this conversation with you before. When you move up the ladder in these different organizations, you know that once you get to the presidency, it's going to be a huge tax on your time. This one, to be honest, I think it's been 60% more work than I anticipated. I'll tell you why. Just about every day of the week, I have an event at night. And throughout the week, there's something that I have to show up for. Mind you, there's a lot of different people in the organizations, and a lot of people really have the first dibs on, say, testifying before the legislature, meeting with a certain representative, going to the governor's office. But if those folks aren't available, I'm it. And I hate to say no, because if I went through the ranks and other people did it before me, I want to be able to be present. And it's not like other things where you can kind of show up and absorb it. I know my practice, like I know we're both part of NJSBA, New Jersey Association for Justice, and that's a realm where we know our stuff. We've been doing it for a long time. Just about every issue you bring up, I'm going to understand and be able to speak to you about it. With the state bar, we have everything under the sun that applies to us. So it's really difficult to show up at a state hearing on a proposed bill in family law and become conversant in a way that you're really going to do your organization right and show up and be competent. So I prepare. It takes a lot of time. It helps that I wake up early. I wake up at an ungodly time. I wake up at 3:30 in the morning. Wow. And I'm usually in the office by 5 or 6. That helps tremendously, because by the time 9 o'clock hits, I'm already sort of running. But it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
What time do you go to bed at night?
I go to bed at 9 o'clock.
9, okay.
And I try to read, but lately, after the first 2 paragraphs, I'm like, and something that I want to read, I'm like, I can't stay up for this.
So that's like 6 hours of sleep?
Yeah,
6 and a half?
6 hours, yeah.
Wow, I always thought you needed 8.
Yeah, no, I've been pretty good with 6. But the weekends I tend to rest. I mean, I'll go into the office Saturday morning. Sunday's my holy day of obligation. I do nothing but family time and just disassociate. And I'm also very good that when I go home, I'm home. You know, when I go home, my wife, my 2 kids are in college, so they're not around. But I'm there with my wife and my dog, and we do things together. I really try to separate home life from work life, and I think that's good for your mental sort of stability.
That's been harder since COVID, though. I mean, I could be sitting on a roller coaster waiting for the guy, and I'll flip open my phone. I'm working. Now I'm not. Now I'm working. So is it harder to separate it given the technology and everything since COVID?
It's funny you bring up COVID, because I was thinking about that earlier today. When COVID hit and we all work from home, I don't know about you folks. You couldn't get a haircut. I grew a beard. I've never been able to grow a beard. There's pictures of me with a full beard. And I set up the station at my house, and we already had something downstairs because the boys had their computer set up, so it wasn't too difficult to set up the printer and all that. And I was a mess. What I would do is I'd wake up early, and then all of a sudden, like around 10 o'clock, I'd be like, let me just lie down for a second. And I'd take a 3-hour nap. Yeah. I just couldn't work from home. So I was fortunate that I had 3 offices, all self-contained, where you didn't have to run into anybody. So I started the habit of going to the office. Again, separating the two. And I will tell you, even during the early times when we weren't going to court, I started wearing, maybe not a suit, but a tie and a shirt, because I was afraid that I was sort of, kind of losing my balance by not being sort of diligent about those things.
Yeah.
And I still always show up in the office, even if it's not a day that I have anything, with a tie and a shirt, just out of habit. I think more of a reaction to that time than anything else. I mean, COVID was a tough time.
Yeah, I was at a deposition once at it was a pretty big defense firm. It wasn't a real big, but it was kind of big. And the defense lawyer, I was taking the deposition, he's sitting next to the client, and he could see out into the hall from where he was sitting. And there was a lawyer out there looking at him twice, and he rolls his eyes and he does this. And I think he was like a junior partner or something, but one of the senior partners yelled at him and said, you need to put on a jacket or a tie. This was long before COVID, but I felt bad for him.
Yeah, I was raised in that sort of environment where one one of my first jobs was a job in a city in Manhattan.
Yeah.
And they say they want diversity and different people. No. In Wall Street, they want robots. I remember being taken to Brooks Brothers, all the summer associates, and told, your shoes got to be wingtips. Your hair better be above the collar. Your ties better be this color or that color.
Really?
And I remember, and I was the only, for that day, I didn't wear wingtips. I was wearing like plain shoes, and everybody was looking at me like, oh, that Norberto doesn't get it. And so I don't know if it's because when I was brought into the law, I thought that way, but I always thought, you should always present professionally, if not for your clients, for the courts. I mean, there are certain judges that give you a hard time if you show up in court. And even if it's an ill-fitting suit, they'll be like,
I've never heard of that one.
I've gotten yelled at for hands in the pockets when I first started.
Really?
I was with the prosecutor's office. I stood up there and I got yelled at for hands in the pockets, like, look like you want to be here type thing.
And if you notice now that we're going back to oral arguments, that some of the younger lawyers don't stand when they're speaking to the judge. And I don't think that's so much disrespect as nobody ever told them, hey, stand.
Yeah.
Stand. And that's one of my themes as a state bar president.
Yeah.
I don't know that we're ever going back to full in-person proceedings like depositions. I don't know why we can't have in-person depositions. How many times did you resolve a case before the dep? You're ready. You've prepped your client. They're ready. They've looked at it. Before we start, you want to call your adjuster? Because my client's here. And there was a string there where I was settling almost 40% of my cases before the depositions.
I think I'm doing it wrong. I've never.
Well, that's because he gets along with lawyers.
That's
why.
I worked with him too long.
I usually fight with the lawyers before the death.
People have different styles. What works for you works for you. That is the way I am. I can't change. If I try to be different, it's not going to work out for me. But, now you're on your dep. You're on, you're off.
Yeah.
And I get it. I mean, we forget the travel. Yeah, even coming here, it's funny. We always do what the GPS tells you.
Yeah.
So I'm like, why is it changing? Why is it sending?
Yeah.
Because of roving road repairs. Thank God.
It's routing you around traffic.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah, I find back to the COVID thing.
Yeah.
I found that before COVID, I would be working in the office longer. Like I'd leave, get home, I'd be like, wow, Jeopardy's still on. I'm home early. Post-COVID, I'm in the office less. But the line between working and not working is like I literally will walk into my house and open my email. And I just left work. And I'm like, what am I doing? Like I'm home for lunch and I'm checking my email.
Yeah.
See, I think as plaintiffs lawyers, though, I'm always trying to we have to be careful to not fit the mold of a typical lawyer because in the way some people think of lawyers, And I feel like when you go into trial, I feel like a third of the jury pool is probably against you, depending on what county you're in. A third is middle of the road, and a third is probably in favor of you. But, when you had that McDonald's coffee cup thing in the 90s and you had the reputation of lawyers, sometimes I feel like if I go into court in front of a jury in a black suit, with jewelry on, you're like, oh, there he is, another lawyer. So sometimes Sometimes at trial, I'll just dress more casually in a way, and it's worked. It's worked in some cases where the defense lawyer is really selling a bunch of BS, and just so you know, we actually do practice law and not just do podcasts. Yeah. So Mark has to actually step out and go to a hearing right now, but he's going to come back.
Just a quick one.
Good luck on the application.
Hey, thank you.
But you really got to be yourself.
Yeah.
Because if you're used to wearing a lot of jewelry and flashy watch,
That's true.
If you do something different, it's not going to be authentic. Yeah. I think a jury's going to look through that. But I tell my sons, I got twin boys, they're 21, and I tell my younger associates, I'm like, if you're making money and you're successful, you can show up in the office in pajamas.
Yeah.
Do whatever you want. But until you reach that point where you've built sort of your routine and you're in your comfort zone and you're generating business and generating revenue, my opinion, and I could be wrong, is you still have to fit a certain mold because people are still going to judge you a certain way. And what works for some people doesn't work for others. I mean, the people with the long hair works for them. Other people got put off. Back when you used to be able to talk to jurors about why they decided, it was a lot more, I think, insightful. Yeah. Yeah, we like this. And I never forget that years ago, the Bernie Getz trial, one of the jurors who found him not guilty said that prosecutor's shoes had tire tracks on the bottom. What kind of fancy shoes? And oh my God, this juror based her decision in part on the guy's shoes. Yeah. So I'm always very careful about, and I always tell when I have a trial, I always tell my client, The moment you walk into that room, you're on stage.
Of course, that's true.
Be careful with anything you do.
Yeah.
Don't do anything flippant. Don't do anything rude. And John Bloom used to always say, the clients, bring them in and bring them out. Keep them in the room as little as possible. Keep them around so the jury knows they're interested and around.
Yeah.
If they're watching your client 24/7 while they're in that room, it becomes a lot more difficult to sort of persuade the jury to go with what you're trying to persuade them with.
Yeah, I mean, the client and the lawyer have to be careful, not only in the courtroom, but in the parking lot, the whole thing. I mean, you got to be super polite. You got to yield because you don't know who's in that car. You know, you got to give them the right of way.
Jerry, what do you do when the jury when they call a panel up?
Yeah.
You're in the front of the room and the jury starts walking in to the room, filling up the pews, the chairs. What do you do?
Sometimes I look at them, sometimes I don't. I don't want to look at them too much and make it obvious because it's kind of like, in a way, you're pandering to them. But I do check them out a bit, especially if I'm running out of challenges. I need to know who's back there.
That is one of the more awkward points in the trial process.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to ignore them.
Yeah.
You don't want to stare at them taking notes like you're being examined like a lab specimen. So I try to be natural as much as you could be natural in that situation because it's not a natural setting.
I try to pick good cases from the beginning. I feel like if the case is good from the beginning, and I feel like I want to be on the side of truth. So I want to pick good cases from the beginning, and I want to not be afraid of the truth coming out at trial, and I want to sort of be in the righteous position at trial. So I try to pick the good cases, and then if we can just let the truth come out and let it all come out, I think the color tie you're wearing is less important than having the truth come out. I mean, by the way, I was just on trial in Essex County, and you popped in. Yeah. I'm not exactly sure why you were there, but in any event, you came in the courtroom and said hello to me, and that was really nice of you. I just want to say, because we were just starting the trial, and you know, we had been working around the clock before the trial started and during the trial, and for you to come in as the state bar president, just give good wishes, and I really appreciate that.
That was nice of you. When you go in and, hey, you know, do a good job, good luck. That's something we've also lost because generally nowadays, if you're in court, you're there for something.
Yeah.
You know, it used to be remember when I was a young lawyer in Essex County, the calendar call, we're 200 lawyers.
Yeah.
You weren't going to get reached.
Yeah.
And, you know, you were there and they keep you till Tuesday, Wednesday.
You're hanging around.
Talk to different people. You'd meet different personalities. Now, if you're in court, you're in court. I was there. I was giving a presentation to the summer interns.
Yeah.
Me and the gentleman from the Essex County Bar, Judge Petrillo, he has a series, Distinguished Speakers. Not that I'm a distinguished speaker.
I think
that,
you are.
You know, a different topic every week. And it was great questions. And it's funny, one of the people came up to me and, Norberto, you remember me? I was a summer intern because we have a summer associate program at the firm. And he looked familiar, but I'm like, oh, you know.
Yeah.
And he's clerking for one of the judges. It's always great when you see the continuity in the practice.
Well, there's a saying, it's be nice to your altar boys because one day they may become your bishops.
Yeah,
you know,
100%.
and I think it's just part of a Christian upbringing, just to be humble and, you know, not be stuck up and think, oh, that person's less, I'm not going to spend time with them. I think it's important to.
I think it goes beyond that. I never burn bridges.
Yeah.
Listen, people have wronged me. I don't forget it. I forgive them.
Yeah.
And I find younger lawyers walk into the courtroom and they're a little bit of an attitude.
Yeah.
And they're a bit condescending to the staff. The staff
God.
I treat royally.
Yes.
Because they're the ones that determine when you go in, when you go out, what you get and what you don't get. And so you always got to be careful with that. And it's funny because coming out of law school, it's interesting. There were, you know, a number of folks that didn't get the job they wanted.
Yeah.
So they hung a shingle and they got a job as a part-time public defender. And then they got the town attorney. And then they got this. And now all of a sudden they're the governor, they're the senator. So you never know the history. And even aside from that, some self-interest, just, it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Do the right thing. Just treat people nicely.
But I think, you know, you say, oh, do you turn and do you look at the jurors and do you look at the panel? You know, there's different games that are played. But honestly, I find that, like, I'm a big fan of Rick Friedman, and he's got a book, Moral Core Advocacy. And I really buy into that stuff. And I think it's really just about having the truth out at trial and not pandering to people. Like in this trial we had a difficult witness. And during the objections and sidebars, he was like looking at the jury, kind of making faces to me, like laughing at me as the plaintiff's lawyer. And he was a defense witness. And we had like 5 or 6 people in the courtroom helping us. And some of our consultants and people are like, hey, you know, you might want to tell the judge that I'm like, no, let it be. Because it was obvious to me that he was trying to pander to the jury. And so we finished his cross that day, but then we came back like 3 days later because we had a break Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, weekend, next Monday. And by Monday, when Monday came, I had his examination, a transcript of it, and I fully prepared because I knew what he was doing. And then when we did the full cross of this witness 4 days later that Monday, and we brought out all the lies and all the deception, it was double worse for him because he had the jury going for a little bit, and now the jury felt almost betrayed by his thing. So I feel like the truth, just having the truth come out is good rather than tricks and what your suit you're wearing. But I feel like if the defense lawyer is really trying to get one over on the jury, if they're really kind of telling a story that's really not true, that's not supported by the evidence, that's kind of trying to get over, and then they're in a black suit and, you know, and I dress maybe in more casually, I think the contrast of that can be, you know, and jurors are smarter these days, you know, they look with all the technology and with social media, I feel like, and AI, they're able to kind of pick up on things better. So it's harder to get things over on jurors these days, you know?
One of the things I hate about our move towards arbitrating everything and binding arbitration clauses and contracts is I love the jury system.
Yeah.
I mean, the truth, what is the truth? Who knows what the truth is? Who's going to accept your version of the facts?
Right.
And I think jurors are very good at sifting through everything and getting to what the facts are in this case and how they should be applied. And listen, I've had 100 jury trials to verdict. I've read all the books. Jerry Spence I particularly like.
Yeah.
I read a lot of these books, and I'll find a couple of golden nuggets. Jerry Spence on a page, I'll outline half of it because so much good stuff comes out of it. I think juries see through the sort of credentials. I think there's been a move, and this may just be me, of defense experts being super well credentialed, super Ivy League to the hilt, and being just likable people.
Yeah.
Because for me, and again, it depends on the expert, it's tough for me to really cross an expert if he's a nice guy or gal. I find when they're obnoxious, rude, and condescending, it's just that from my big verdicts and my verdicts over the years, I think I'd like to say I did. Half the time, it's what the defense lawyer does, how they behave themselves, what the expert witnesses do, and how they turn off the jury. Again, what we do is so fascinating because we're bringing in 8 people who do not want to be there, who think what we do is awful. And it's funny because I think this is from Jerry Spence when they bring up the McDonald's case. I'm like, and I know the NJSBA
spin on
it is. No, it was really dangerous. I'm like, you know what? I hate the McDonald's case more than anybody else. Yeah. Because it makes us look like charlatans. Yeah. But I'll tell you why this case is different. And let me talk to you about this case. Yeah. And you know, you think there's too many lawsuits? I agree. It drives me crazy seeing all these billboards.
The billboards.
I see all these billboards and I'm thinking, oh my God, what it's doing to our profession. Then I think, should I get one? Yeah. So, you know, you're drawn in and out. So I don't ignore that fact, but I do sort of think that, especially judges. Yeah. And I love my judges. Yeah. But judges prefer you to go in and put your case in like everybody else does. Plaintiff first, you're experts, and you get no cause and you go on your way because they're not going to get appealed. Yeah. I started doing something differently a while back. Is my first witness in the common sort of fall down or automobile case is going to be my radiologist. And why my radiologist? Because the jury doesn't want to be there. They think your case is nonsense. They think, and if your first witness is just your plaintiff, who generally is your worst witness because they're not sophisticated, they're really, you know, unless they have a really compelling injury, they're not the star of the show. They're not. Oh, I knew it. This is all nonsense. Yeah. So if you wait, this is about nuclear science now. This is something, and then you bring in your treater. Then you may want to put in a family member, somebody, and then you put your client next to last. And I remember saying that in a panel for a Nichols seminar, and there was a judge saying, "Well, you can't do that." I'm like, "Where in the rules does it say that?" Now you can forbid me as a judge because you can call the rule, but there's no rule that prevents. Well, then how do you lay the foundation for the testimony? I'm like, Judge, and it was his case. He was the judge that wrote the case that said, if you can't read a radiology, an MRI report, you can't testify. You have to bring in
the Braun case or whatever.
He was the judge who wrote that opinion. I'm like, Judge, under your position, then I'd have to call the treater, have them step off the stand, bring in the MRI radiologist. That doesn't make any. Of course, you could do this.
Yeah.
So you got to think outside the box.
Yeah, that's interesting. All right, so what is the State Bar Association exactly? It's funny, when I was in law school and then became a lawyer, I'm like, what's the bar? Is that where the lawyers hang out at? Like, what is the New Jersey State Bar Association? Is it private, public? What does it do?
It is a nonprofit private organization. It's not public. It's interesting you say that because there's different states have different formats.
Yeah.
There are some states that are. I'm going to the ABA convention next week, and about half the states are mandatory bars, which means their bar association, if you're a lawyer, you must be a member. And they run the ethics, they run the admissions, character and fitness, they run, the dues to maintain your position as a lawyer, they run everything. We're a voluntary organization. Okay. So
in Jersey, the Supreme Court does all that.
Supreme Court and the AOC does all that.
But yeah.
So in New Jersey, it's voluntary. So which is good and bad because now we could take certain positions politically and we could file amicus briefs and we could lobby for legislation for the lawyers that if you're a mandatory bar, you cannot do that.
Right.
So we could do a lot of things those mandatory bars aren't, but we still have to attract members. And our membership is about 17,000 lawyers. So a little bit less than half of the practicing regular lawyers in New Jersey are members of the State Bar. And the State Bar really promotes congeniality among the bar, professionalism.
Which is important.
Well-being, access to justice, rule of law. And we protect the judiciary because judges are very limited in their ability to sort of lobby for their interests. So we also, when we had the judicial vacancy crisis, and that's a crisis that just materialized, I think, unnecessarily. But, during COVID, a lot of judges were saying, I've had it. This is impossible. I'm retiring, taking early retirement. The legislature and the governor were thinking, well, there's no trials, really. Trials technically never went away, but in reality, it really slowed down. We don't need to bring in new judges. So the judicial vacancy crisis became an issue that the judges couldn't really complain about, so we had to be their voice. So we are the voice of the bar on multiple issues, which is different from NJSBA, which we're also on the Board of Governors, and that's more the clients of New Jersey. I was president of the Hudson County Bar Association. We represent the interests of the county in the big scheme of things. I always like to refer to the State Bar as like, you could be part of NJSBA, that's like, HBO. I could be Hispanic Bar, that's ESPN, but we are the internet that hopefully tries to connect all those interests. And there are diverse interests, so we get into a situation sometimes where a position seems clear, that we got to represent everybody's interests. And we're a purple state, even though people see us as a blue state. And
when you say we're a purple state, you mean New Jersey or the association?
New Jersey. And so we try to stay, as politically neutral as possible because we don't want to go very far one way or the other.
Right.
And even forget about politics, plaintiff defense.
Yeah.
I mean, I got a meeting later tonight at 6 o'clock, the civil trial section. The civil trial section on purpose is half plaintiffs and half defense. And we got a number of retired judges and we got some active judges that come to the meetings just to share the time. But we make a point to sort of come to a consensus. And if we can't, we don't take a position.
Yeah.
A lot of times, and the Board of Trustees meetings are once a month, and they're fascinating. We have 45 Board of Trustee members, which all the books will tell you that's unmanageable. But for the most part, we come to a consensus on most things. And we come to a consensus because we rely on the committees, the sections, the affinity groups, and the counties to give us feedback. If there's an issue that we have to take a position on, we before the meeting, send out, we want feedback from the parties that are affected by this. And they meet and they get together and they'll tell us how they voted. Yeah. Sometimes, it was clear, 20-0, this is something we need to do.
Right.
Sometimes it was close. And so a lot of times, not because it's not an important issue, not because there's not strong feelings on it, but because there's a lack of consensus as to what's best for the lawyers in the state, we don't take a position on it. And that's tough because one of the things as president that's difficult is I get asked all the time, why are you not saying something on this issue? Why are you not taking a position? And while the ABA, I have a lot of criticism towards it, one of the things they do well is give you written materials. And one of the written materials is when do you take a position on something publicly as an organization?
Right.
And it's like 5 points. I don't have them committed to memory, but they are generally, is this in our wheelhouse?
Yeah.
Is this something that affects lawyers? is there a consensus as to what the right position is, which is not always the case? Will our statement, comment move the needle? Will our participation help? Or is it performative? Because sometimes people will say something and it's performative and makes you feel good.
Yeah.
And it's actually doing more harm than good. Why? Because, all right, I put out the statement, I did my job. Yeah, but you haven't done your job, because you really should be talking to your legislator, maybe getting behind an amicus brief on this issue, helping out that lawyer who's a solo who needs some help on this issue, or really pushing and making more of an effort that if you just put out a statement, I sent a check from the office, that's it, I'm out on this issue. So it's a fascinating, challenging situation. And again, we live in very, very volatile times, politically, economically, financially. So it's work.
How long is your tenure? Is it a 1-year term?
10 months more.
10 months.
So it's funny. So I was president of state.
How can you get, I always wonder that about organizations like the State Bar and NJSBA. How could you get any traction or do anything in a year, you know?
It's good and bad. I will tell you why. Because it gives the next person an opportunity to sort of participate. And it's not a dictatorship.
Right.
I'm one person in the room.
Yeah.
I can't say which one we voted. I was the only person to vote for a rule change because it was a rule that I wrote.
Yeah.
And everybody else was against me.
Yeah.
And I raised my own. I'm not going to be against my own rule.
Yeah.
So I run the meetings for the most part, and the agenda is set by the staff. But you're just a steward, and you try to be a steward. Now, some people come in with a very, very specific agenda. Gerald and Lawrence, God bless her, her issue was wellness.
Right.
And she
Lawyer wellness.
Lawyer wellness.
Okay.
And Christina Malfi, right before me, we had a strategic plan strategic plan retreat for 2 days where everybody in the Board of Trustees was down the shore in Red Bank, and we met for 2 days straight just going over the strategic plan. And a couple of interesting things came out of that. But you're there for a year. When I was president of State Bar Foundation, that was a 2-year term because that's the charitable arm of the organization. We give out grants. And so that term is 2 years because by the time you get to know how the IOLTA funding works and how the applications work, you don't want to use that, gain that knowledge and lose it. So that was a long ride. That was a 12-year ride from the beginning of the executive board to the end. And some people don't take that ride because it takes so long. I think I may be the longest lasting member of the State Bar Foundation because now I'm ex officio a trustee because of my position with the bar.
So why is lawyer wellness a
Wait a
thing?
second. Did you win or lose?
Yeah,
or
by
you
the
don't
way,
know?
Mark, how did that go?
Well, I'm glad I'm coming back when I was. Lawyer wellness was going to be one of my big questions. So as often happens with what we do as attorneys, people who aren't attorneys can't wrap their heads around, and I think why attorney wellness is such a big thing. We're rescheduled for 2 weeks. Because just to not give too much of it, it's a big construction injury case. We're trying to get all these documents. The purpose of today's conference was let's schedule, new time frames to review these documents, get your experts to do their reports. We still haven't produced the documents. Which means there's some really good stuff in those documents.
But tell me how, when you get denied something, or a reasonable adjournment, or a reasonable extension, or reasonable sort of an addendum or an amendment to some pleading or discovery when it's denied, how that takes years off your life. Years off your life. When you get, and like, wait a second, what am I, and then you got to do a reconsideration, and then it was just something that, wait, I thought you knew that. Again, with attorney wellness, I don't think the courts, our legislature, the public appreciates how we as lawyers, that one thing can set us for a loop and really, really, really take away from our well-being.
Family, and you start thinking about
all you see is that motion, that order floating around in the clouds. I've been there.
The level of detail we've talked about, and I don't know, again, I doubt you brought it up, but like you had something where like a comma was missing in a defendant's name, and they're like, throw the case out, all this.
That wasn't me. I was fixing it from someone else, but you're right. I know what you're saying.
Our committee there was a recent directive that was issued by Judge Blee, and it was in large part because of work that our committee did. Unfortunately, a lot of counties have been telling their staff, if you get a request for an adjournment, just say no. It's a blanket no. And there's been real problems. Illness, a death in the family, a vacation that we took. And so now the directive says, you You have this is the structure of if you get a no that you think is not reasonable, and this is who you call, and this is how you get to it, and the judge has to get on the phone with you. And I get it, again, because it is just a vacancy, because of the backlog, the judges, it's tough to be a judge now. And their staff, I'm friends with a lot of judges, and it's funny how as you get older, your contemporaries get on the bench. They lost a lot of staff during COVID because now you could work remotely, you could go anywhere, and if you work in the courts, you have to come back, you have to be in person. They've lost a lot of quality staff, they have new people. It's tough for them. So they end up doing a lot of work themselves, and because for whatever security reasons, I mean, it's not all there in front of them anymore. It's on a screen. You get a package like this, you got to, even if your computer is the best in the world, it's cumbersome. It's a tough situation.
That new directive is good. I think there was some criticism that it didn't do much, but the new directive essentially makes it easier to get adjournments, especially I think of trial adjournments. So I think that's good. But the attorney, well, it's funny, like, with technology, you'll have a guy. He'll be like a military commander in Virginia, and he'll go to work in the day, and he'll be firing Hellfire missiles and killing people on the battlefield. And then he'll go home and have dinner with his family and coach Little League after. And while we're not soldiers, in a way, we are fighting people's battles on paper. And for many people, it could be a life or death situation or close to it, or at least their economic life or death. That we're fighting for, and I do feel sometimes that we get a little bit of that. We catch flack, like I'll be, and especially not being like when I used to commute. I commuted a half hour, didn't really have a phone in the car, and you could unplug and detach and decompress. But now it's like I'll be working, and I'll be in lawyer mode, and then a family member will ask me something, and I'll ask him, and like, stop talking to me like a lawyer, and I'm like, sometimes I just can't turn it off. And like you say, the deadlines and fighting people's battles. And, when there's a ton of money at stake, someone's economic life is at stake. And on the defense side, they're defending that. Maybe someone doesn't have insurance or something. For the record, usually they do in personal injury cases. But sometimes they don't, or it's a commercial case. They don't care. Like, it's their economic life at risk. You're looking for a ton of money for them, or oh, sorry, you're not feeling good. I don't care. There's no mercy in it. And there is like a whole wellness thing with that.
And it's on you, and you've got to take it. And you got to take it whether you're feeling great, whether you're feeling bad, whether you've eaten, whether you've slept. You've got to take it, and you've got to push forward. Lawyers, I think, have the highest rate of addiction or alcoholism among the professions, because you can't say, hey, I need help, or I'm having trouble, or financially I can't do this. And not only the stakes that we have on behalf of our clients, the threat of, I always do everything I do with an ethics lawyer and a malpractice lawyer over each shoulder.
Yeah.
Because that's what's happening now too.
Yeah.
Any mistake you make, you get a legal malpractice suit in a couple of weeks. And I was I was on the board and the chair of the Client Protection Fund. That's the fund that reimburses clients who've been robbed by disciplined lawyers. And I love my service there because you were making people whole in a way that very few things, right away we could write a check. And you would hear the story of the attorney's discipline. And it was the saddest thing in the world to read, started out well, family problems, divorce, financial issues, drinking. They found him dead in his office. He killed himself. Or, health issues or mental health issues. And sometimes it was just a pathology. Some people were just like the Bernie Madoffs that wait a second, this person, how does he sleep at night with what he did? He robbed from his mother. He robbed from his sister. Those are few and far between. Usually it's somebody who at some point should have said, I got to tap out here. And so I like the fact that one of the resources that the State Bar provides is we have that mental health hotline. And this is free. You get 3 free consultations. And mind you, most of the people that call already have health insurance, but they don't want to call their office health insurance because they think they're going to get flagged. And we thought we'd get 20, 30 calls. We've gotten thousands of calls since we started it.
I was going through a tough time, and just being it, and I actually went to it one time, and I met with a guy, and it was really helpful. It was law related, whatever, and I went to the guy, and the guy was super understanding, right at the center there.
Yeah.
So I encourage any lawyers that are going through a tough time. It's the, what do they call it?
That's New Jersey Lawyers Assistance Program.
The assistance
it's
program.
right there in our building
in New Brunswick.
It's great staff. It's anonymous. And again, sometimes you just need a breather.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, and you're like, why can't I? You just go to counsel. You know why you can't breathe? Because this staff person's driving you crazy, or this person. Divorce yourself from that situation, and we have one life. So what I like about the state bar, for the most part, and NJSBA too, it's people that still love what they do. Don't we have those people that we know, I hate this, I hate going to the office. Change your job.
Yeah.
You got one life.
Unless you're Hindu, then you might have more than one.
That's true.
You'll come back and get reincarnated.
I'm pretty sure at least this part is what we have here on Earth.
Yeah.
And you got to make the most of it. And if you're having a problem, there's help out there.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how you see people turn their lives around just because they got a little bit of help and they got back on stride.
Yeah. Something to be said for it. Sorry, but like you're saying, to go talk to someone like that, like, you go home, you talk to your wife or someone at work, like everyone kind of has somewhat of a vested interest one way or the other. They want to be like, well, no, you're going to be all right. But to go to someone that is just purely objective, they're just like, I'm just here to listen. So helpful. It's a great resource.
And even aside from the professional resources, I mean, think about when you were a young lawyer and you were going to court. You had your contemporaries that you could share your sort of concerns with. Am I doing this right? And one of the things I love about the State Bar Association, bar associations in general, is that, and I hate the term networking, you find allies, you find folks that you can call. Because, when you're a young lawyer and you're having an issue in the office, there's usually nobody in the office you could talk to. Because they'd be like, what? How do you not know that? But they take the file away. If you don't understand that, you shouldn't be handling this case. Or, this is happening. Is this normal? And it's always great to have a group of people that are similarly situated, especially when it comes to raises and bonuses when you're a young lawyer. How much you make? Is this the right amount to ask for? And I got to tell you, so I get calls all the time from young lawyers. They're like, I'm at this firm and I'm only covering depositions. I haven't done a trial. I'm like, how long have you been there? 6 months? When did you graduate?
Yeah.
Time takes time.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's all you need to hear. Listen, you're in a good pace. You're in a good firm. You're getting well compensated. Learn. Yeah. Now, if you're still there 10 years and you haven't stepped close to a client or a courtroom, there's some space in between. But I think there's a sense of, I was like that when I was young too. I wanted to, have it all yesterday. And sometimes that gets you into trouble because you're overselling yourself. And we all have to oversell ourselves as young lawyers. I look at some of my CVs. I was throwing stuff out. I'm a hoarder, and my wife goes crazy. I was throwing out some old file. Oh, my God. Yeah. And it's like NAG personal file from like the 90s. And I'm looking at my old CVs, and I'm like, that's not what I did. Because you didn't know anything. You're trying to oversell yourself.
So does your firm, what's the name of your firm that you're with?
Bloomford.
Okay.
Bloomford Molinari is like 15 people at this point, but Bloomford is our trade name.
I remember back in the day, I remembered it as Bloom Goldfaden. It was a long time ago.
That's when I got there was Bloom Vasquez, Peter Vasquez, who was my direct boss when
I think it was Bloom Goldfaden before Vasquez.
No, it was Bloom Vasquez.
Oh, and then both.
Yeah, we just celebrated our 100th anniversary. We've been around because John Bloom's father started the firm years ago.
That's really cool. So is it mostly contingency work?
It's all contingency work. We only do plaintiff's personal injury. We don't do workers' comp. The bulk of our cases are medical malpractice. Harris does a good share of products cases. John Burke, and John Molinari. John Molinari is the managing attorney, but me and John Burke are mostly in the Hudson office. That's more of a high-volume practice because of the nature of those offices. Yeah. So those are more the common, auto, fall down, some construction cases. But the med mal is what I think we're most famous for historically. Yeah. And it's funny because I know more about med mal history in New Jersey than I want to. Yeah. Because, John Bloom would tell us the stories. Med mals used to not exist back in the day because you could never get a doctor to testify against another doctor. And people like their doctors. They still like their doctors. Med mal cases are still very difficult. Yeah. Then there was one expert who goes, oh, I'll do it. And so this one expert started testifying against all his fellow doctors, and he was the go-to expert, and the damages are catastrophic in med-mal cases. So, it started being lucrative because you found an expert, and then all of a sudden it became a very lucrative practice, and more people got into it, and then all of a sudden the insurance companies realized, you know what? We're not going to pay on these.
Yeah.
And it went from 0 to 60 in terms of the defense efforts on these that where it came to the point where we don't pay out anything.
When was it that there were no cases, like 70s, early 80s?
60s.
60s.
That expert started testifying in the late 60s, early 70s, that sort of era. They started tightening their belts, and it was one firm, and it's not coming to mind, that had all these cases. Then they realized it was conflict. You can't represent the radiologist and the oncologist. So then they started, and all these firms split out from one main firm. I want to say Shane Lee and Fisher, but I'm not sure if that's the one. But then all these other firms that are known now as med-mal defense firms that are, and there's not a lot of med-mal defense lawyers out there. They sort of keep them all the same people, and they all were split off as these conflict rules arose.
Wow. All right, so wait, you were telling the story about how then med-mal arose, and then it became, they stopped paying.
They stopped paying, and so then you had a lot of people got out of practice, and it was sort of like a secret sauce. John Bull, we got the secret sauce,
Yeah.
and very few practitioners did it because it was just so. You still no cause about 90% of the times because these doctors are so, that people like them, and that the standard's pretty tough deviation. Also, you need experts generally from outside of Jersey. When I try my med-cal cases, there's a guy flying in from Washington State and another one from Texas, and they don't settle because if you settle, it goes on their permanent record. So then most of these cases, you got to try. It's usually when the trial started and if it's really going badly, which is rare, but it happens, that they then consent to settle because it's very, unlike other areas of the law, a doctor has to.
So then what happens when they get hit for $1 gazillion?
You get the appeal, but most of them have the money, have the resources. They usually have good insurance coverage.
Right.
But they're on the hook. It's tough for them they can't file bankruptcy, most of it. Although I will tell you, like anything else, when you do med-mals, a lot of the target defendant doctors are not the best of the bunch.
Right.
They're relatively easier to sort of, it's their defense experts.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, one of my med-mal cases was an oncology case, and I remember I had to read tapes to sort of pick up on how you pronounce this term, that term. And like anything in medicine, there's 3 different terms for just one device.
Yeah.
And I remember being with boxes and boxes of files all summer preparing for that trial, and it went into the winter. And then when we got scheduled for, it was Super Bowl Sunday weekend. I remember spending Super Bowl Sunday in a hotel in Trenton going through my opening arguments. And again, it's labor intensive, and you're going up against these experts that do it every day of the year for the last 30 years, and then your oncology case, the next one may be an orthopedic case.
Yeah.
So it's a challenging practice.
So how do you, as a plaintiff's firm like Bloom Fort, I mean, you guys have a lot of lawyers, right?
Yeah.
It was like 30 or something?
No, I think
20?
about 20 lawyers. I haven't counted, 20 lawyers.
So we find here, like, we're just constantly busy. And, you have all those billboards on the turnpike and everything. But I feel like there are so many more people that need help, and that could be cases that you would take on contingency, not just a good personal injury case, but commercial cases and all different kinds of things where it's just, do you want to put the time into it and the effort to turn it into something and to get a person to recovery? Like, I don't find that there's a dearth of work out there. Like, how do you guys find that, in terms of what you do? You have to specialize and be good at what you do. Otherwise, you can lose real quick.
So when I went out on my own, I had my midlife crisis at 40, and I go, this is all I'm doing.
I don't need these people.
I didn't even want to go on my own. I wanted to sort of take a break. I didn't know if I wanted to teach or do something else. I got up to here with the practice, which was the best thing that could have happened because I got so re-energized. When you start...
What got you? Was it just too much work? Ungrateful clients? Or what?
It was a classic midlife crisis. It's like I was doing well, a beautiful wife, beautiful house, making money. Is this what I want from life? Do I want something more? And I go, this is my chance. And then I really thought I wanted to... I still teach. I lecture all the time. What I did was integrate what I really wanted to do into what I was doing already. But I ended up I wanted to take just 6 months. I had a lot of money saved up. I just wanted 6 months.
It was like a sabbatical.
Yes, which I recommend for. What firm was
I haven't taken a day off.
Yeah.
I haven't taken more than 4 days off in 30 years.
Pashman Stein, Michael Stein spoke at a panel. And if you're there 5 years, whether you're the receptionist or the senior partner, you're taking a 1 month to 2 month sabbatical paid to clear your mind. But it was something similar to that. And what happened was people were calling me, hey, you want to come? No. taking a sabbatical. Oh, look, I got this thing. No. And I kept saying no. And then whoa, this is a good case. I can't say no to this. But if I say yes, now I have to have office space, insurance, a phone, a computer. And I was only going to do it part-time, and I was blessed. And this is what I love about my practice. George Rios, who's my direct competitor, Spanish-speaking, let me use some space in his office and rent some space. My competitor. And from that, went to get more space. I used to not even have a full-time secretary. I had a receptionist, that would do it from her house. Then I had in-person. Then it grew to the point after 5 years where I had an associate, a per diem, 4 staff people. It got a bit much. But starting a firm from scratch makes you appreciate so much.
Yeah.
How this relatively, and I was spoiled because I was at a firm where business came in whether you tried or not. How difficult it is to get a case, to retain a case, to maintain a practice. And I was always lucky that I was able to get business. But during that time, I read every business book, every marketing book that was ever published. If it wasn't going to work out, it wasn't for lack of effort. And it's funny because all the marketing and business, they tell you the same 10 things like 100 different ways. But what I find is, at least at Bloom, we get a lot of work from word of mouth because we've been established. Back in the day, a lot of these firms got it from the Yellow Pages.
Yeah, remember that?
I remember, Yellow Pages, these lawyers
Who's this guy on the back cover? I never
saw him, but he would get all this work because I arbitrate. I'd go, when that went away, where do you put your money in? And I'm fascinated by the commercials and the billboards. And I got a buddy who was very honest with me. He goes, I don't think I get any work directly from the billboard.
Yeah.
But when somebody does have an accident or something and they need a lawyer and they're looking at the list, they'll remember my name because I'm on the billboard.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it makes sense. You got to put yourself out too. And this is from the business books I read, organically, the way you push yourself up to the cert, because most people look at the internet for cert. We do. I'm trying to find a lawyer. The SEO companies that try to sell you, I'm going to. Yeah. I think organically, if you're involved in organizations, if you lecture, I know you lecture quite a bit. If you write articles, I know you write articles. Organically, that gets pushed to the top of the list, and you're not paying for somebody.
Yeah.
And when people search you, not just your website comes up, but all these other things come up.
But the thing is, marketing is just one piece to it. Like, you could have a list of 10 cases, 10 files, and this file's worth this, this, and this. No, the file's worth 0 until you put the effort into it and advocate on behalf of that person. I mean, the marketing is just one end of it.
So that's
I
love this. I love this topic.
Like you can't market and be like, I'm going to be successful.
So that's the.
By the way, Norberto, one other thing I have to say. Levinson Axelrod used to have that ad that said it matters what attorney you choose. I haven't seen that ad in a long time, but it's super true. I mean, I arbitrate in Middlesex County, and there are cases, the lawyer's looking for $150,000 on it, and we wouldn't take less than like $800,000 on that file. And then I'd have a case where the injury is worth, $1 million. The lawyer's looking for maybe $225,000 on it, and he or she's working it up as a $225,000 case. They're not even putting the efforts into it. They're not getting a report to calculate the cost of future medical bills. They're
not getting an economist. They're not getting a life care plan.
All different things.
I love this topic. So Bloom's philosophy was always do the work, do it right, and the cases will come.
Yeah.
And it was true back in the day because, on that Suits and Deals, Bloom always had a case up there, and we had the advertising on the bottom. Nobody reads the law journal anymore because it doesn't exist.
There isn't even Suits and Deals anymore.
No Suits and Deals. If you look at Suits and Deals, they're from like 3 or 4 months ago.
Yeah.
But the fact is, if you get good numbers, the word spread. I think you need a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Because you could be the best lawyer in the state. If you're not marketing yourself, nobody knows.
That's right.
And when I speak to defense lawyers, it's funny. When I went on my own, they're all like, you just got to get the cases.
Yeah.
Because, part of it is working them up correctly. Yeah. And when I lecture, I always say, you'd be surprised on a case, even where there's not a lost wage component. You get an economist to say, okay, there's no lost wage now, but guess what? Because of this, he's not going to get the raise because he doesn't qualify for this position because it involves travel. Or at the end, now he can't do the law. So you'd be surprised at how much more value a simple economist brings to your case. That being said, it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
And again, we all know, and they'll go nameless, people who are out there on the lecture circuit marketing themselves that you wouldn't trust paying a municipal court ticket that you pled guilty to.
Yeah.
But they put themselves out there, and they have. It's a balance. Again, with everything, it's a balance. Even with like the stress from work, it's a balance. You got to have a little bit of both. But it's funny, when I would speak to defense attorneys, they'd be like, you just got to get the cases. And sometimes getting the cases is as simple as being in a good spot, in a good street. We have this office in North Bergen, and we do all this advertising and marketing for it. I'd say about 20% of the people retain us because they're like, I love this awning. It's like this strange colored teal. And I'm like, you got and it frustrates me. Referral source, the sign. And so, because it's different, it stands out, it's comforting. But again, I'm fascinated by what brings in business, what doesn't bring it. You know what doesn't bring in business? Not doing anything. So
So wait, so as state bar president, do you have like senators and people contacting you? Do you have the governor's office if you need them? Like how is that? Do you have people trying to lobby you for things? Or are you lobbying the government? Or
not to make myself even important, but yes, and
you
yes,
are important. I want to learn about it.
You got to be respectful. So if you get a call from Governor Gerald or before Governor Murphy and ask you to do something, it's tough to say no. Now, if they're asking you nonstop,
now will you get an actual call from them, or it's a staff member?
It's usually a staff member, but usually in the meetings you're meeting with them.
Yeah.
The same thing with state senators, same thing with assembly people. Now, the frustrating thing is, we all know who the power brokers are in the Senate and the Assembly. But I want to talk to everybody. And there's nothing more frustrating than going into a meeting and then all of a sudden, well, they're not there.
Yeah.
They're a staff member.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, time is valuable. But again, you don't. For the most part, they're respectful of your time. But like, we'll meet with the Supreme Court at least once a year. We meet with them in chambers and we go have dinner with them.
And who? When you say we, who? It's the
executive
president
board,
and
the whole executive board.
And how many are on the executive board? It's like 5 or so?
5 or 6, yeah.
Yeah.
I should know this.
Yeah, whatever. I'm not a quiz.
Don't hold it. Delete this part of the podcast.
We can, Oscar, if you need
It's
that.
a typical executive board, though. You have a president, vice president,
Immediate
treasurer,
past president. This is
secretary.
strange titles. But immediate past president stays on for a year, president. Behind me is Glenn Troublefield. Behind him is Dana Manning from McCarter and English. Behind her is Greg Hubert, who's with the Saferman firm. Behind him is Richard Kleinberger, who's like a solo down in South Jersey. He brings a very distinct flavor to the board because he's, I think, the only solo. And then behind him, Alex Gallo, who's with a big political firm.
All right, so you go in, you meet with the Supreme Court, and what, you have like an agenda that you want to talk about, something they want to talk about?
We have the official agenda,
and
then we have the dinner, which is very laid back and very comfortable.
And will you meet with all, is 7 or 9? How many are on the Supreme Court, Mark?
So I would say
put
7.
them on the spot.
7.
It's 7.
Wow. So the formal meeting at their chambers is a bit more stuffy because we have specific things to bring up. Each one of us gets the topic, and they have their staff surrounding them. So generally, they defer to the staff. The staff usually has an answer for them. You got to be very careful. And this is with a lot of judges you find, but especially the Supreme Court. Sometimes I'll be like, hey, Justice, so-and-so is retiring from being the presiding. She's so great. I wonder what she's going to do. Norberto, I can't talk about that. Oh, yes, I'm just trying to make conversation.
Yeah.
But again, they're really attentive. And Judge Blee, who's the head of the AOC, the executive director of the AOC, they do more than I think most lawyers appreciate. So before you get involved in a bar association, you really don't know how things work. Now I know more about how things work than I even really want to know. But a lot of the issues you think are court issues are really AOC issues. They really set the tone for a lot of how things operate, how things work. And, rule changes where they come from. Some are just from the Supreme Court. Some you could do by statute. Some you could do by legislation. It's who you lobby. It's who you complain to. Complain is a rough word. But who you bring to the attention to that there's an issue. But we're blessed, I think, in New Jersey that, they're pretty uniform. I mean, I lecture all the time on the Supreme Court year-end reviews, civil court. They're pretty uniform. There's very few dissenting decisions that come from our Supreme Court.
Yeah, which I think is good.
Yeah,
I think that's
which
a
is
good
sign.
testament to.
And they're not elected, which is great. So I was on JPAC.
Yeah.
And I was on Hudson County JPAC and the state JPAC. It's just odd how the process of selecting judges is in New Jersey, but I'll take it over elections in a heartbeat.
Yeah. I think it's important to have that independence, that judiciary independence.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful process, and I got to, for the most part, and they don't have to meet with us. They don't have to lecture with us. So we're blessed that they participate, they invite us.
Like I noticed in Pennsylvania, there are elected judges, and when I was researching different issues, I'm like, oh my God, one case it's all the way here, and then there's another case that's all the way here. It's almost like they're not following stare decisis, which is jurisprudence, whatever. They're not. It's almost very kind of political in a way.
Yeah.
Like it.
And the idea of tenure. I mean, you have tenure. Once you put in those 7 years, and it's a lifetime appointment up until you turn 70, which is odd because 70 is the new 60, is the new 50. Like, it's odd that you got to move on when you turn 70.
Are you able to give a flavor of like some of the things you're discussing when the Bar Association's meeting with, for example, Supreme Court justices?
It's confidential, so I really can't talk about the nitty gritty. But generally, it's about a perception about how either things are running, how things are being handled, more administrative. We can't talk about cases or black letter law or cases that are before them. Mostly it's how, I'll give you an example, if people are finding uniformly in family court, they're not getting this, which they used to get regularly what's going on, what's wrong, is there a change in this? Or if we want to streamline the ability to get an adjournment, like we just got from them. Generally, they're more housekeeping things, how we could help with the judicial vacancy was a big deal.
That was huge.
Steps we're taking.
I mean, that was really bad at one point. I mean, there was, if you don't have justice, like if you don't have people that can dispense justice, it's going to be done in the streets or something.
I was on the interview circuit regularly during that time, and I got put in all the Spanish shows because I'm the one that speaks Spanish. And they try to sandbag you at the end. And I remember being in one of the local TV shows, and they're like, well, Senor Norberto, isn't it true that you could just simply file in Union if Mercer's clogged? I'm like, no, you can't.
Yeah.
Who told you that? And you see this misinformation out there. So, and it's interesting, the history of who puts up judges, candidates to become judges. Depending on who you talk to, it used to be always strictly the governor's role, and he didn't rely on the state senators. And they said that changed with Chris Christie, then it became the governor's role. And then when you had non-lawyers in the governor's office, they deferred more to the state senators. It depends. I think it changes over time. Right now, again, people who aspire to become a judge, I tell them, listen, make sure that you are very close to your state senator, because at the end of the day, how it works right now, even though the governor nominates you, you're not going to get a nomination unless you don't want to be embarrassed and not have something go through if you haven't cleared it with the senators. And most counties are pretty good. The counties that we have difficulty with are where you have multiple senators and you need multiple people on board to sort of approve.
They call that senatorial courtesy?
Senatorial courtesy, right.
Yeah, isn't that where they go like each party kind of gets a pick type thing?
And the reality is you could be picked and you could be vetted, and we as the JPAC could say qualified, highly qualified, you should be, in the Supreme Court, forget about it. The Senate schedules you. And if they don't schedule you for a Senate judiciary hearing and the year comes to an end, it starts all over again. It's a fascinating process.
So is the AOC, the New Jersey Administrative Office of the Courts, is that below the Supreme Court or parallel to the Supreme Court or something?
That's a good question. And I don't know if the way I see it, it's sort of parallel.
Yeah.
They have a different jurisdiction, different responsibilities, but
I guess it would almost be like in Superior Court where you have the judges, the presiding judge, the assignment judge, but then you have the clerk's office.
Yeah,
so maybe it's sort of like
I think
the clerk's
Judge Blee
office.
is a bit more powerful than the average clerk.
Okay, yeah.
And Glenn Grant, they have a lot more influence on our day-to-day practice as lawyers than people really appreciate. That's something I learned becoming involved in the bar.
It's funny because as plaintiffs' lawyers, and if you read the books by the top plaintiffs guys, they would say, be ready. You want the trial date. You want to move forward. And generally speaking, it sounds like the AOC wants that too. They want certainty. They want trials. They want less adjournments. But at the same token, if you're not ready and you're a plaintiff's lawyer, it can keep you up at night.
So when I started practicing 33 years ago, and I remember showing up in Essex, and this was the Wild West. You show up for the trial call, and the defense lawyer would be like, oh, on this file, I haven't deposed Jerry yet. Can we get 3 months? Yeah, sure, come back in 3 months.
Yeah.
That was an extreme. In New York, and I'm licensed in New York.
The note of issue.
So you do discovery, and you tell the court when you're ready.
Yeah.
And now, mind you have to go for those status conferences, which are, which tax your time, let's say. But again, that's the different sort of extreme system. I think with us, I'm a fan of trial date certainty, of course, because there's certain cases you're not going to settle unless you get assigned out and start picking a jury. By the same token, there's cases you have in your cabinet that will never settle and you need a verdict. So I get that. The issue that I have with trial date certainty is everything with reason.
Yeah, of course.
So because of my positions, I get calls all the time. I got a call from a lawyer, I'm not going to mention names, who said, Norberto, I'm being wheeled in for an emergency surgery. I have a case on the list in Essex, case on the list in Bergen. I don't know what to do. I don't know if I'm going to survive the surgery. I don't know what condition I'm going to be when I get out of this. Who do I call? And I was floored.
He was getting denied adjournment request?
He didn't know who to call. He was in a gurney. He was about to get wheeled in.
Was it like the 5th or 6th?
No. This was an emergency. He was at a restaurant, and they were wheeling in for emergency surgery.
Wow.
So I only say that we are conscientious professionals. We worry about it. I don't think there are a lot of lawyers out there that just make stuff, although there are. Part of the problem is, another part of COVID and the changeover in the staff, we build our reputations over years and years of showing up, being ready, never asking for an adjournment. Guess what? Post-COVID, there's a bunch of new judges, a bunch of new staff. They don't know the good guys from the bad guys, the good actors from the bad actors. And that's a problem because I never ask for it unless I really need one. And for the most part, I do a lot more Ben Asset depositions now. If I know a case is going to be tried in a county that's cumbersome, so I just have it in the bag. I prefer live testimony, but I've been burned enough times that I know that.
Will you bring him in live even if you have him on film sometimes?
It depends on how it went. I will. So I always worry about how I look.
Here's your camera right here.
No, how I look. One of the Ben Asset depositions I took, the visuals were great, the exhibits were great. You couldn't hear it, the door was muffled, and I'm like,
oh no,
I never think of that.
Yeah.
So all those little things. I always.
And you don't want to find it for the first time when you're sitting in the courtroom and you press play in front of a jury.
I say, even the liveliest expert testimony is kind of like, people say, oh, people are used to watching TV. Yeah, they're used to watching, football. They're not used to watching PBS. The only way you watch is PBS. This is a really dry episode of PBS.
Yeah.
So especially economists.
Yeah.
You got to have them there because it's more lively. Radiologists, I think the imaging, unless the screen is fantastic, I want them there. But again, I just want to have the option. If it goes well and it's an expert I need just to cover that base, and I got another person that's charismatic. So I always, for the average case, I'm not talking about a catastrophic case. I'm not talking about a huge construction case with multiple defendants. The average case that gets tried, an auto rear end hit or fall down. I monitor all the verdicts in Hudson County and Bergen County. I used to pre-COVID. Now it's impossible to do. It's more difficult. And there would be these big verdicts on no-pay cases or low-pay cases.
Yeah.
And it ran the gamut. It was different judges, different lawyers. And I'm like, what is the common theme between all these cases? And it was, they called 3 experts. And I almost fell out of my seat because I realized the last big verdicts I got on cases that I either should have lost or I called 3 experts. And it's like this, oh my God, moment.
You mean like 3 liability experts?
No, 3 medical experts.
Oh, okay.
You call your treating doctor, chiropractor, physical therapist, what have you. You call the doctor who did the orthopedic exam or the injections or what have you, or the surgery, and you have the radiologist.
Yeah.
Why? Because defense usually just calls 1 expert. And again, it's not a magic formula.
Yeah, right.
Just like
right.
I lecture a lot with Andy Fraser. I love Andy Fraser's, time unit
he's
argument, the tree for the forest.
Yeah.
But he says it and I say it. It doesn't make a bad case good. It makes a good case great.
Yeah.
So there's, and also if you spend all that money on 3 experts and you get no cause or get low cause, that's painful because you got to pay those experts.
For sure. Yeah.
But there's these little patterns and things that you do that I think, are hiding in plain sight sometimes.
So listen, one of the reasons we did this podcast is because I was always fascinated I've always been fascinated. How does it work? How does power work? How does law work? how does legislation get passed? And that's why I was really excited to have you come on. And thanks again for coming on. I know you're not paid to be the state bar president, right?
I might be. I haven't received the check. But no,
Yeah.
no, you're not.
And so I appreciate it, and I want to thank you on behalf of like every other lawyer in the state for your service doing that, because I know it's taken a ton of your time, and it probably takes a real hit in your practice where you actually make monies. But with that, trying to figure out how all this works, like. So I've been reading so much about how rideshare companies, you know, I was in a rideshare. I was in an Uber coming back from like Newark Airport at like 5 a.m., like, I don't know, 6 months or so ago. I forget. I probably told the story before. And literally the driver couldn't see. He was going 40 miles an hour on the Garden State Parkway. And he kept looking and he couldn't see. And I'm just like holding on, hoping he doesn't drive into the guardrail. And I've heard other horror stories. So obviously, if someone gets hit in an Uber, you know, if they're a passenger or another driver gets hit by a rideshare company's negligence, you would then sue the driver and you would sue the rideshare company. The driver's probably got limited insurance and limited assets, and Uber is going to be the deep pocket. So there's been a lot of litigation and controversy where Uber says, you can't sue us because they're not our employee, they're an independent contractor. And then a lot of states have limits, how much insurance the driver has to have. And the more insurance the driver has, the more insurance that car has, the better it is for people in the public who are injured by them because they can get a recovery. But now I'm hearing that the rideshare companies are paying senators, congressmen, whatever it is, our legislatures paying them a ton of money, supporting their campaigns, and trying to get them to pass laws to make it harder for people to get compensation when they get crushed by a rideshare company in terms of a crash or something, or God forbid, you know, an assault by a driver. And it's like, is that how it works, where it's just money? They're going to have a ton of money. They're going to pay for the campaigns, and then they're going to pass. And the other thing they're trying to do is they're trying to limit the fees lawyers get on the cases. And you're like, hey, that's great for the public. Lawyers make less money. But what people don't realize is if you limit the lawyer's fee, first of all, you talk about health and wellness of lawyers, that we're basically soldiers for people, and it's draining and it takes years off lives. It's a ton of work what we do. And if you're going to limit the fees, they're going to be a disincentive for good lawyers to take on these cases. And even when you have good cases, like I said, if you have 10 files, they could be great cases, but they're not unless a good lawyer puts the right work into them. So by Uber trying to limit what lawyers get, really what they're doing is trying to disincentivize lawyers from taking cases. So I guess that's a long way of asking, are these rideshare companies just going to throw a ton of money at our elected representatives and basically buy the legislation they want so that when their drivers injure or kill people on the road, that we can't do anything about it?
Uber's a fascinating topic because I know more about this than I care to know. I think I'm on the rideshare committee, but I also lecture about this a lot, and I track it nationally. In other states, Uber has been very successful in limiting attorney fees, in putting caps, and in putting the perception out to the public that this whole suing Uber is a combination of lawyers, doctors getting together, and the client gets nothing. These billboard lawyers, the billboard lawyer campaign against plaintiffs' bar originated from the Uber campaign down in Texas. So in New Jersey, you don't want to say they pay legislators. That's not what happens. They support their campaigns, but so do we. I think Uber's problem in a state like New Jersey is that people use Uber. People recognize that Uber is a company that makes a lot of money, even though technically Uber doesn't make as much as people think they do. Uber thought by this point already there would be driverless cars. For Uber to be successful long term, they have to move to driverless cars because they still don't make the money that they anticipated. And although they're very well resourced, their revenue is sort of tapped out. So I think in New Jersey, the public recognizes Uber. I've deposed Uber drivers. You ask point blank, do you think you work for Uber? Of course I work for Uber. And then you get the defense attorney for Uber trying to redirect them and all that stuff. But I think most people recognize that Uber is the company that sort of is behind all of this. I think for the first time they're paying not just the usual people that are aligned with their interests, the Republican members of our legislature. They're sending money to everybody. And they're blanketing people. I think they're also doing that sneaky little thing that when you get your receipt, 30% of this went to pay our legal insurance. I don't think people pick up on that. I think we as lawyers get frustrated. I think most people don't read up on that. I think the problem with Uber is that before, the remedies were more limited. In New York, it's a mess. They have the black car service that insurance picks up, whether you're here or there. The problem with Uber is that there's no PIP, there's no coverage. So if there's an accident, your PIP doesn't pick it up. Most people don't have health insurance, for better or for worse.
$10,000 med pay.
Only if you're the driver. Only if you're the driver, not if you're the passenger. Yeah. And so generally, Uber rides don't take place on a 9 to 5 commute. They take place at night when speeds are higher, when there's drunk drivers out there. I think the vetting process for an Uber driver is next to nothing. I got a quick story. My Uber driver was arrested. I was down here for July 4th or one of the weekends down at Jenkinson's. We were staying at Spring Lake. It was me, my wife, my 2 kids, 4 of us. It was right after the fireworks, so we're not getting a car. So we waited a while. We finally get an Uber, and the Uber comes, and there's 2 people in the front seat. I'm like, I've never seen that. And we just want to get home at that point. So we all pile into the back. We're crushed. And a woman drives, and a cop comes on. Oh, there's a cop. I'm like, why would she be worried about a cop? Oh, he put the sirens on. They pull her over. I'm like, what is this? And she's like, why'd you pull me over? Because you know exactly why I pulled you over. Your headlight's not working. License registration. I don't have my license. And me and my wife are looking at each other. And my son texts me, I just saw the driver text, she's going to get arrested. Turns out she had a suspended license. The Uber driver was the one in the passenger street that I think was inebriated. So long story short, it used to be if you had a driver's livery license, you had to have a certain type of license.
Yeah.
The famous test for London cab drivers was a test nobody passed because you had to know every street in London. A medallion in New York was worth almost $1 million.
Yeah.
So there's got to be some nice in between there. I think they're successful in Texas because they had a really public campaign. I haven't seen that campaign here, not that it's not coming here. The Uber statute we have is wonderful. Does it have some missing spots? Maybe. I think we might have benefited from having some sort of MedPay or PIP coverage because I arbitrate all the time, and I see these Uber cases come in where there's like $800,000 in bills. I'm like, no matter how badly injured, the bulk of it is going to go to the doctor, which is fine. They got better, but if they would have had a PIP component to that. But right now, as our statute is, we have one of the better statutes, and I got to tell you, it protects the clients because the folks who use Uber are generally the ones who don't have a car.
Yeah.
They're more susceptible to sort of losing their livelihood if they get involved in an accident that affects their body. So it's like that for a reason.
All right. So what other big issues do you have? Like, what do you want to do in the 10 months you got left? Like, what's on the agenda for the state bar?
So I got asked that question.
Yeah.
I got asked that. Are you nervous becoming president? I'm like, should I be? Am I missing something? So my big agenda is twofold. One, I want people back together. I want courts to bring back lawyers because for mental health reasons. It's interesting because initially the mental health concern was let lawyers work remotely, being out there, being in traffic. I think this stupid phone is more of a tax on our mental health. So
it is, for sure.
I remember reading something recently that said, it was about St. Ignatius. He learned that certain things brought him closer to serenity, to God, what have you. Certain things brought him away from peace, God, serenity. And there are certain activity, things that we do. And this phone,
it's terrible.
It takes me away from peace and serenity.
100%.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, even knowing that, it's the first thing I look at when I wake up, last thing I look at when I go to bed.
Yeah.
How did you learn when you were a young lawyer? You learned by seeing somebody in court behave themselves in a way you're like, I'm never doing that. Good God, look at what they're doing.
Yeah.
Or I want to aspire to be that person. How did you learn how to make a proper application, objection, what have you? And you learn that by being in court. You learn about what's going on, things like that. Yeah. Again, as best as we can to bring people back in, to have more sort of a sense of community. That, and the other thing is everything that comes across my table, every rule change, decision, legislative proposal, what have you, I look as a solo practitioner that I was for 5 years.
Yeah.
Fought's not a bad word. We pushed against, they wanted to raise our annual registration. had they raised it, it would have been a 40% increase in the last 5 years. That's almost double.
That's per lawyer, right?
Per lawyer.
Yeah.
And
It's a big number in a big firm.
and there's nothing that's going down other than maybe, the billable fees for my friends who do defense work. They're getting killed. My friends who represent institutional clients have had to have meetings, and they had to present, what are you doing with AI to keep your billables down? You have to do a presentation. So we're getting pushed by every direction. With not requiring a brick and mortar shop, you have lawyers from all over the country practicing, quote unquote, here. With the change in the sandlot rules, now you could have non-lawyer partners at firms.
Yeah.
Well, that's not a rule in New Jersey yet, Norberto. Well, but if you have an Arizona address,
I was going to say Arizona's done that, right?
you could do that. And so all of a sudden you have a firm flush with assets that could out-advertise you, out-promote you, out-commercial, out-billboard anybody in the state.
Flush with assets from venture capital.
Correct. And they want a return on their investment. They don't care about justice. They care about a return on their investment.
Yeah.
And you do some class actions, right?
Yes.
So you know how that pressure is. If you got a person there like, all right, I know that's not fair for the clients, but at least they get paid and we all get paid. You don't want that unnecessary. At the end of the day, they could file for bankruptcy. You're going to lose your license. So everything that comes across, there's all these little incremental rules. If they changed, like, I love Judge Sabatino, but every time he has an opinion, there's 5 extra things we've got to do in our cases. And it makes us better lawyers, but it gets to the point where it becomes economically not feasible.
Yeah.
When I was a young lawyer, I tried a lot of cases early on. There were, minimal policies. Had a car. So you call in
the
the
police report on one side of your file,
he'd look
the
at
medical report on the
I
other
agree with the
side.
films. Now all of a sudden you got to call. It became
Yes.
those cases economically not feasible. And I'm with you. And so I'm of a mixed opinion as to taking cases that have a limited policy or law. If I got a person that I like and all of a sudden we learn, it's a limited policy, part of me says, sign off.
Yeah.
We're not equipped. That's a loser. The amount of money Bloom is paying on their staff, and we're going to lose them even if we get the policy.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to get them the best possible result. They're going to say, Norberto's, he's awful. All he got me was. On the other hand, I hate to think that I am signing off on you only because. So what I tend to do is I have a network of lawyers that I'll send those cases to. But there's also longtime clients that I'm like, listen, I know I'm going to lose, but, it's going to be a fight. And at the end of the day, but are you okay?
Yeah.
No, Norberto, whatever you can. This is important to me. It really would make a difference.
Yeah.
So again, there's the economics of the law. There's why we became a lawyer, and I'm the first foreign-born president of the State Bar Association. I think I haven't checked back 100 years.
On your
there
Wikipedia.
may be some token Canadian that we haven't checked out.
Yeah.
But when you're an immigrant, you always have that little bit of an outsider status. No matter how ingrained you are into the system, quote unquote, there's always a part of you that you're not really, you're another. And my clients, and I still have that sort of feeling.
Well, I remember seeing the picture of the Native American Indian, and the caption says, "You're all illegal."
Oh, right.
Anyway.
You're all immigrants. But there's immigrants and there's immigrants. It's funny because when I came to this country and I grew up in Hudson County, being an immigrant wasn't a thing because we were all immigrants.
Yeah.
Hudson County, we were all immigrants, first generation, or we were a minority group, African American, Puerto Rican. It was always like, so it wasn't a big deal. It was just part of who we were.
Yeah.
And I didn't like you not because you were Irish or Italian, because you went to Emerson High School.
Yeah.
That's what the sort of tribal, because Hudson County was like 15 high schools within a square of 5, because Hudson County is Union City is the most densely populated town, the most densely populated county of the most densely populated state. It was just the way you were raised. North Bergen, my hometown, is the second hilliest city in this country. First is San Francisco.
Hilliest,
because it's right in the Palisades.
On the Palisades Ridge.
Yeah.
So it goes up and down. North Bergen is long. Palisades Park is not as long.
Okay.
I'm full of useless information. I was,
I was
mayor for a day back when I was in high school. But, I always have that sort of outsider status, which always sort of, why did I become a lawyer? My dad did very well for himself, but my mom was a stay-at-home mom. There were so many circumstances where we got taken advantage of, and I could tell. And I never wanted to walk into the room, any room, feeling uncomfortable.
Do you feel because you were able to check the Hispanic box, though, that you got a leg up kind of in different things?
So that's a good, and it works to your benefits and it works to your detriment.
Yeah.
So like NJJ, you have to have a minority speaker. So I get put on panels I don't belong. I think because they run out of Norberto's.
Listen, we're not going to get down that road
Yeah,
too much, but I remember I was on a panel once, and I was doing the thing, and I was like, oh, I got this person, she's great. Oh, but we need and I'm like, oh, but she's really good. I'm not sure what her ethnic background is. It doesn't matter, Anyway.
But it works both ways, because sometimes you think, oh, you got this, or you got this position because you're Spanish.
Yeah.
But they also underestimate me sometimes. And I'll walk into the room with like Norberto Garcia, what kind of name is this? And I might not be the smartest guy in the room, but I'm going to outwork you.
Yeah.
By 200%. And I'm going to know more. I'm going to know more people. I'm going to have more resources. So it works to your advantage and your disadvantage. In the end, it's a wash. We all have obstacles. Even if you're a good-looking guy like Gerald, even that's an obstacle, because people think, he just gets by on his charm.
Well,
every person has an obstacle.
The Hispanic,
soft obstacles, hard obstacles.
The Hispanic thing is funny because, in a way, giving someone a leg up or giving them an advantage because they are quote-unquote Hispanic is almost, racist, probably not the right word, but stereotypical and stereotyping someone, because I've spent a lot of time in Central and South America and other places, and there are quite a few Hispanic people in those countries that could buy and sell most of us 10 times over. Okay, so... and by the way, their skin looks whiter than a Norwegian, European, and they're like oh, you can check a box, and
By the same token, I will tell you, when I was interviewing with a major firm that will go nameless in New Jersey, with one of the equity partners, and he goes, "You're Cuban? I thought all Cubans were black," and it's because his exposure to Cubans is solely from the Olympics, and a lot of black Cuban boxers, Teofilo Stevenson, one of my heroes. And how can a guy from New Jersey, and this is a New Jersey firm, because Cubans that are most diverse. I got people in my family with blonde, blue eyes, and they're African American. They're like a black person, just as dark. Cubans run the gamut. So do Colombians, Mexicans, also. But, for the most part, the Caribbean countries, it's a very diverse group. So, again, yes and no. Diversity and those affirmative action issues are a tricky subject. I think at the end of the day, I love this country because no matter where you come from, what you come from, if you put in the effort and you do the work, you're going to get to as far as you want yourself to get. And there's obstacles. Do people, I'll be honest, when I call an offer, Norberto Garcia, are you a client? No, I'm a lawyer. I got to speak to Jerry. Okay. I remember one time, oh my God, this is stupid. We were at Macy's buying furniture, and they go, oh, and I was making a load of money. Like, oh, your credit. I'm like, do you know how much? And you got to speak to our credit helper. And the person starts speaking to me in Spanish. Like, I speak English. And that's a stupid example. And again, we all face obstacles.
That's very anecdotal.
There are very anecdotal, and there are soft obstacles and hard obstacles. Hard obstacle was where you weren't given a mortgage if you're African American a couple of years ago in this state. Wow.
Yeah.
Hard obstacle is if you're a woman, you can't become a member of this organization. Soft obstacles are, your name is a little funny.
Yeah.
You look a little different. Yeah, that's an obstacle, but it's something that, it's not, we're not.
I always feel like when the Republicans say they're going to they're going to appoint a Hispanic Supreme Court justice, like in the U.S., it always turns out to be a conservative Cuban.
Yeah. Well, Cubans tend to be conservative.
Why is that? Is that simply because of the whole Castro thing, and they thought that the Republicans were more anti-Castro?
It's changed over time, but initially, Cubans were very anti-Democrat because they felt JFK betrayed them in the Bay of Pigs by not providing air cover. Also, they see the Democrats as being more socialist.
Because the Cubans in the U.S. would be that escaped the Castro regime.
Now, that is changing because those people, like most of the people that lost, because my aunt, I love her, she passed away. When I went to visit Cuba 26 years ago, I don't know how you could go back to that country. Yeah. Like, what am I going to do? I got to visit my grandma. And I go, you know what, disembark, this and that. I go, maybe we should try something different. It's going to help the government. I'm like, yeah, but if it helps the government, help the people. And she said to me point blank, I don't care if the policy helps the country and brings it to a golden age. Those people stole my youth. they stole my life. I had a golden life there, and they took it away.
Yeah.
I'm never going to give them an inch. I get that. But those folks are passing away. The next generation, it's ingrained in them, but they don't have the direct experience. If you were really wronged by somebody, I don't care if you're not going to.
You never forget. Yeah.
I had a Spanish teacher, and this is all I'm going to touch on this subject. But
Did we get a little controversial there? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. I had a Spanish teacher who was from Cuba, and she gave us this example. I was in like middle school, and she's like, "All right, put your head down." She's like, "Ask God for candy," and we're like, "Dear God, please give us candy." She's like, "Put your heads up." Nothing. She's like, "Put your head down. Ask Fidel Castro for candy." And then you look up, she throws all this candy in the air. She's like, "That's what we were taught, like growing up." She's like, "We were brainwashed on like this,
crazy.
that," and I was like, "Wow!" Like,
so they had so Castro, when he took power, wasn't communist. He was just one of a series of revolutionary changes that happened throughout the years. It wasn't until he got painted a corner that he goes, "I've been communist," when he was fighting with the government in the U.S. And then he aligned himself with the Soviet Union. But as you grow older, there's things that you don't know what to believe is a myth. They sent a bunch of Cuban children through a Proyecto Peter Pan. Peter Pan was the Catholic Church would take kids because they thought they were taking kids and sending them to the Soviet Union, to China, to indoctrinate them. Later on, they said, that was a CIA story. Those kids who went to the U.S. and were separated from their parents, they thought they'd be back in 3 months because they thought Fidel would be overthrown. Some never saw their parents again.
Wow.
Some were put in foster care, usually for good families, but some bad stories. But there's a whole group of people that are Peter Pan kids who came here and didn't see their parents again for another 5 years. Once they were already adults, they were sent over at 6 and 5. That being said, one of my mother's cousins was taken to China, indoctrinated. He learned how to fly MiGs. He fought for the Cuban Air Force. He fought in Angola, and he learned how to fly. So it's funny how there's an element of truth to sort of every story that you're told, but there was really, and they were called los pioneros, the pioneers. They had these red scars. It was like Boy Scouts, but it was for the Soviet style Boy Scouts. But again, it's just fascinating, that generation. And it was real loss. But when I went back to Cuba, I thought I'd feel emotional, and I just felt sad that now as multiple generations of people have not reached their highest potential because of government issues. And that's just Cuba. That's a lot of governments across the world.
Sure.
Cuba's near and dear to me because that's where I was born. But, a simple change in leadership, structure, this and that. And Cuba, people don't appreciate how large Cuba is.
Yeah.
People don't appreciate what a significant middle class Cuba had. Cuba does not just have sugar. It had light industry. It had banking. It had finance. It had all these guys and gals went to Miami, went to Union City and built all this. And it's just a shame. And it's a shame that you can't retire their vacation there. And right now it's really bad with the current embargo. And, I think now is the closest we're coming to real change because their government, their president actually said we're looking to negotiate a change. It'd be wonderful if it could in my lifetime.
Yeah.
awesome book on Cuban Missile Crisis, 1 Minute to Midnight. You ever heard of that?
I've read that. I read also The Best and the Brightest by David Halberstrom. And they were about to invade Cuba and provide air power. And then one of the generals said, this is the size of the bay where they're invading. And this is the size of this island in Japan where we lost like thousands of soldiers. And Kennedy changed his mind based on that advice, allegedly. But again, when they had the Bay of Pigs, which we call Bayamon, we call it by a different name, the Castro government arrested all my cousins who were living on the island. Anybody who had the potential to assist the people who were invading, they arrested. And the first thing when Castro, they took away all the guns, I could speak about this all day, but it's a fascinating topic. At this age in my life, I want my sons to know Cuba.
Yeah.
You know, I want to be able to, and right now things are so bad, and I feel bad for the people there. There's no power, there's no this and that. It's just a shame. It's something we should have moved on at this point.
Like the Soviet Union is gone, and I understand the Cuban Missile Crisis and why it mattered. They were only 90 miles from Florida, but at this point, they're sort of an island. They're not really getting any support from Russia, Venezuela. You know, so I don't know. I don't see Cuba as much of a threat, so to speak.
They're not a threat. Again, it's just more of a political thing. It's the significance of it. And for better or for worse, the Cubans in Miami are still a significant political power. In Florida, for better or for worse, decides the national elections every 4 years, done in a couple of other states.
Yeah. Wow. That's
Crazy. So I may have missed some of this when we were out, and if we can weave back into some other things. So your background, you went to UPenn, got your law degree from
Yes.
UPenn. That's awesome. We talk about advantages and stuff. No one's just going to let you in the door to UPenn. You got to work your butt off.
So I always tested.
We had a judge on, though, that got into Columbia because he was good at wrestling.
Don't say the name. Don't say.
I was going to go to Columbia undergrad.
That was
because of the coach.
Lou Cascio.
And they fired the coach, and I lost my entry into Columbia, so I went to Seton Hall. So I went to whatever college I could drive to because my mom didn't have them. My dad died when I was a sophomore. We had a great life here in Cuba, with a great success story. My dad, heart attack, first and last. So me and my sister were not going to go away some fancy college. So my colleges were limited. I went to Seton Hall. I loved Seton Hall. But at Seton Hall, I tell my kids, I worked full-time while I was in college. I worked full-time at UPS doing security. So I would work in an 8-hour shift, 2 hours. The other 6 hours, all I did was read because I was at a desk and nobody was coming in and out. So I did very well in college, straight A's. I got a very good LSAT. I got one question wrong. I always tested well.
One question wrong on the LSAT?
Yeah, I think that's because I thought in Spanish before I thought in English.
Wow.
And that gives you such an advantage in word origins, spelling, what things mean. I always thought that was like a hidden thing that people didn't appreciate.
Because if it's one language, you're seeing it in one direction. If you have another, you're seeing it backwards and forwards.
Too direct. And it's funny because when I was put in school in New York City, I first lived in Jackson Heights, I could never realize why I had no friends in kindergarten because I couldn't, nobody would talk to me. And it wasn't that, because I didn't know English. I learned that in college. I was in a class and they said bilingual education wasn't introduced to New York until 1970. I'm like, wait a second. And I called my mom. We didn't have cell phones in college. We had payphones. I go, Mom, did you put me in school without knowing English? Yes, that's how you learn. And it's true. That's how I learned. But I think that always gave me an advantage. But I will tell you, going to UPenn, going from Seton Hall, I was always like, smartest guy in the room. Because I prepared. And you go to Penn, and it was a small class. Penn is 200 per class. There were students there whose parents were professors, judges. There, I went to school with Derek Pugh, the Pugh Foundation, with the son of Ron Perlman, with people who just generational wealth, so it was a shock to the system. But Penn has opened up doors that would never be open. That's why, so my two sons are at Penn now, and they're at Wharton undergrad. And I go, and they had different choice. I'm like, you'd be surprised at the doors that open to you if you're at a certain institute. Because a lot of companies now, they don't want to do the work. You're there, okay, you kind of know what you're doing. But again, eventually, no matter what school you go to, if you're talented and you have the work ethic, you're going to get to where you need to get to. It's just some places just drop you off sort of farther up in the line than other places do.
What did that kind of do for you? I read somewhere, I think you did collections work at one point, at Penn, then some criminal defense.
My first job, this is great. My first job, and I love Seton Hall, my first job in college was a co-op program.
I think I got some letters from Pressler over the years.
Pressler. So as a college kid, I
owed like $38.50.
Oh, we would, and this is back before computers. We had the index cards. And so we would do cold calls. It was a great group of people. I learned Civ Pro back and forth.
Yeah.
And I remember there was something like that they told us to do in training and nobody had done. I'm like, it was like a letter to like the counties, some sort of bank search. And I did it on a whim. And everybody we got to have a meeting. All the team leaders, what happened? Somebody messed up. Norberto did this 2 months ago. And I'm like, oh boy, that's it. And we've collected. I'm like, yay, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So that it was a great sort of way to learn. And then I, worked at a firm in Manhattan. Again, it's interesting, that kind of work, because while they all speak about diversity and sort of, and I won't say the name of the firm, but you be at a golf outing. And, all of a sudden Jerry would say this awful joke. And
yeah.
And I tell him, and because Jerry's uncle is the president of Capital Bank or whatever. The attorneys in the room, like the one guy who was a big shot that could yell at everybody. Why did he tolerate that? Because his client is this and that. And back then, I wasn't a member of a country club. I didn't really golf. I just was sort of out of sorts. Now I could probably work there because now, you build certain comfort. So I found my comfort zone. I always tell this to young lawyers, you find what you're good at. Like I always thought I'd be a good appellate advocate because, listen, law school doesn't train you to be a lawyer. It trains you to be a law professor.
Yeah.
So the last thing I could think of being in front of 8 people trying to convince them to do something they don't want to do. No, for that, I'll be an accountant. And you realize you love that. How do you realize? Just by doing it, getting better at it, getting rewards, getting results, getting that feedback from your contemporaries, from your clients. So you rarely know what you really want to do early on. I mean, there's very few people, I think, unless your parents did it and you sort of, I had cousins that were lawyers, but nobody that I dealt with on a daily basis that I knew. And to be honest, I still don't know what the other people on my board, like Glenn Troublefield, I don't know what he does on a daily basis. Diana Manning, and Christine does employment defense. I kind of think I know what she does, but I'm not sure what these people are up to.
I'm with you on the cell phones and everything, and I think it's good to come back to court more for things. But frankly, we are way better able to serve our clients by the. In the old days, I'd have an arbitration in Middlesex, and the day'd be over. I'd be done at 3:30, 4 o'clock. I'd drive there, sit around, do it, drive back and fight the traffic. I'd be exhausted. Now, if I have an arbitration at 11 in Middlesex, I'm doing 2 motions in the morning, arbitration and deposition that afternoon. So we're way better able to serve our clients.
By the same token,
by Zoom.
Arbitrations, I would always bring my clients to arbitrations. And they would see what the court is like. They would see what you do. I mean, part of the problem of our job is the clients don't see all the work we put in for them. All the preparation for deposition of a defense expert, all the preparation for cross-examine at trial. They only see us and they think, oh, this guy hasn't called me. Calling you is like this part.
I learned a long time ago not to look for gratitude from the clients. If they give it to you and they appreciate it, it's fine, but I don't have the time to bang my head against the wall. I remember I had a jury. It was like my second trial. I got a good jury verdict. It was $120,000. And the case was on State Farm's fraud list. And they gave me the case to try because it was a loser, whatever. And I got a great result for the client. And we did the thing, and she was questioning a $15 charge for something. Yeah. I'm like, oh my God. And then I realized, you know what? I'm never again going to look for gratitude from my client. If I get it, it's fine. But I interrupted you.
I think the toughest part of our job is client preparation for testimony.
Yeah.
Because there's some people who are naturally charismatic and likable. Those clients are not the majority. The majority come in, they're angry. They don't want to be there. They don't know why they're not getting compensated. And also, most people come into those situations with layers of resentment, anger. And what I've done differently, the older I've gotten and the more sort of, mileage I've got behind me, is I spend a whole lot more time trying to peel the onion of these clients. And sometimes I'll tell the client point blank, listen, it's tough for me I don't like you. You really drive me nuts. And if I don't like you, the jury's not going to. So we've got to get to a place where I like you and I understand you. You got to tell me, why are you so angry?
All right.
Why is every call you make to me accusatory? What is going on? And if you spend time with them, even the most awful person, you get to, you know why? Because of this, I think my kids don't speak to me.
All right, I got to tell you a client story, okay? So I tried a case, the second case ago that I tried, the client lived out in Washington State, and he had to fly to Hudson County, for the trial. And so I just had him stay at my house. He literally lived at my house for 2 weeks. We would cook dinner with him. He'd eat with the family. And I remember some way mid through the trial, they had offered some money, and I'm out in my garage lifting weights with no shirt on, and the client's sitting there talking to me, and I'm talking to my client about whether or not he should take the settlement, and I tell him no, whatever. And I remember having the client live at your house, it's such an advantage. And I remember he was sitting at the table, and he had a bone, a dog bone, like a rawhide. And he gave it to my dog, and the dog would play tug of war. And he was like, oh, and he couldn't do it and had to let go of the bone. And I was trying the case in Hudson County before Judge Vanek, and she required everything to be marked. If you referred to like the pencil, it had to be marked. So I remember when, so I brought him in, and we were talking about his injuries, and I pre-marked the dog bone, and I pre-marked it, handed it to him, and then this trial that I just had where you came in and said hello, I had the client stay at my house as well for like a week and a half. He lived at my house. He lived in Plainfield. I have him live at my house. And there's no better way to get to know the client.
Well, you can't do that. I think most people don't do that on every case. I do, and I used to do it more often, visit the client at home for prep, their home.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I've told you the story because I've heard this story before, but stop me, if you've heard this story. I remember I had a client who was a single mom with 4 kids and, all young and really hard. Like, the type, from Jersey City, the hair pulled back. Because if you grow up in certain neighborhoods, you can't show any weakness.
No weakness, yeah.
And she was tough as nails. She was a school assistant. And I go to her house, and I'm like, this is tough with all these kids. I'm like, well, they're my kids, but not really my kids. Like, well, what do you mean by that? My sister died of cancer. And when she died of cancer, the husband didn't want to deal. And so I took him on. And I'm like, oh, my God.
Yeah.
You're a saint.
Yeah.
I would have never learned
right.
that.
Yeah.
And I had another case where it was, was this a wrongful death? It might have been a wrongful death. And I visited, and I saw these pictures. And the guy was really, really active in this church. And I'm like, I didn't know he was religious. Oh, no, he was a member of this organization. Look, this is the picnic they had all the time. He ran that picnic. This is the raffle. There's a whole other realm to him. And you don't pick up the hobbies. Like, what's that guitar? I used to play that all the time. I can't pick it up because I can't. Yeah. All these little things, the nuances, what's important to them. Again, you can't do it in every case, but if you got to try that case, I really try to prep the client at their house because there's just things you pick up that you otherwise wouldn't. Again, sometimes we see what we want to see. Like we have a story of the case, and sometimes a story needs to include your client.
What it helps spending that time with them too is that you don't overplay the case either. You don't overplay the injuries because you see what they can and can't do. Yeah. It's important.
The toughest thing I find is having a client with means and with money. Because nobody wants to hear that you can't go on your boat anymore. Nobody wants to hear that you can't golf or you can't ski.
Well, it depends what county you're in, though.
Yeah, no, even in certain counties, you always got to find something and that was important to you.
Yeah. There hasn't been one time that we've gone to a client's house that it hasn't been beneficial. Like I remember we had a client who broke her arm real bad, and all over her house she had like washcloths tied over the handles on things because it was easier for her to open the doors.
She put them on there because she knew you were coming.
I was coming. No, she was a very nice lady. They bought me a cheesesteak as well.
Nice.
Norberto's been so generous with his time. He's not getting paid for this either. So you got any other questions there, Mark? That you want to? He's got to go to the civil trial section meeting.
I got him here. I got one or two more for you because I talked about and I'll use a big word, and I think I'm going to use it right. Like being a plaintiff's personal injury attorney, I have is myopic the word? Oscar, can you look that up? I have a very myopic view of the practice of law, where I just think about plaintiff's personal injury attorneys. Your career, you've been a trial attorney, plaintiff personal injury, med mal. It sounds like some of that. Do you do med mal?
Yeah, a little bit. Now, this year with all this stuff.
Yeah, no way.
Yeah.
But so anyways, that's the lens that you've looked at your career through, but now you're New Jersey State Bar Association president, and it's not just, plaintiffs, personal injury attorneys, it's defense attorneys, it's family law, it's, the whole spectrum of attorneys. How are you able to kind of balance that and, look at the whole field of attorneys? Because it seems like you do a good job with it.
I always think that we rely on defense attorneys to be there, to be reliable, to be sort of honest. And defense lawyers always say, keep filing those cases. Yeah. Because if you're not filing them, I think it's a very sort of cooperative field in that we rely on each other. And if defense lawyers are hurting, we're going to be hurting. And a lot of the conversation I hear is that, these defense lawyers are getting undercut by lawyers who are in Pennsylvania. They don't have to pay the taxes, the real estate, or the insurance, and they're offering billing rates that are dramatically less than what we can and still survive. So if there is a bill or legislation to sort of limit the ability of out-of-state lawyers to just come in and drop, and do pro hoc vice on these things. I get it. So I'm there for the sort of benefit of all lawyers, not just lawyers that do what I do. When it's a different practice area, I'll be honest, I don't always know the answer. There are times where like the business section comes in with a proposal on a UCC and I'm like, I have no idea. And then I try, I do my effort to learn it, and I still sort of, wait a second, this seems counterintuitive. Why would you want this change? So that's where the network of people comes in. And one of the best things about being involved in the bar is that I don't know the answer, I could try, but I know somebody I could call and they'll be like, Norberto, let me tell you, cut to the chase. This is why it seems to not be a good idea, but this is why it's really a good idea. Because then you don't have to do X, Y, Z. Oh, now it makes sense. The best thing I've gotten out of years of being involved in the bar is if I have a trust in the states question in Cape May, I know somebody I can call. If I have, I do this mentorship program in Union City once a month. This year I haven't been able to do it because it's just too much. But we do high school, the 1 hour is a presentation, 1 hour we have dinner with the kids. And the guy who runs it is a prosecutor in Passaic County. Now he's with Riker Danzig. I go to him, what's your day like? What do you do? And he goes, nonstop calls on this section of the law. I'm like, why is that relevant? Because if we don't get a trial date by this time, they get a month of credit off their sentence. So I'm constantly getting called. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Where we're talking about dollars and cents, a person who doesn't want to spend time in jail is talking about, how can I limit my exposure to time I have to spend away from my family in some jail cell in Trenton? So I'm always fascinated by why it is, what drives things. And again, if it makes it easier for the bar. Now, there are times I got to put my NJSBA hat and say, listen, this is going to kill us. I'll give you an example. There was uniformity across the board. When they came out with that opinion, I think it was 745, that we couldn't give referral fees as a certified lawyer to New York lawyers.
Yeah, that lasted.
I remember that.
If that rule existed, I'd make more money because I don't have to pay them a fee. But we get a lot of work from New York lawyers. And we have things that are in escrow. Now we can't release them because we risk our license. And again, even defense lawyers who don't rely on contingency fees where, this is bad for you, it's bad for us. It doesn't make sense. And our firm, the NJJ, NJSBA, everybody was on board. It was just, and a lot of these rules, again, that's why I'm against somebody in a room saying, oh, this might be a good idea. No. It's not a good idea at all.
Especially if they don't have that real world experience, how it translates.
I always think to become a judge, and it's funny, different people have different criteria to become a judge. I think the ideal judge has to have had great success and great failure in life, great joy and great pain in their life, because you're going up there and making decisions on people. And a little caveat to that, I would like judges to have spent some time in the courtroom and this is a big ask, most judges don't qualify, had to have made payroll.
Yeah,
because
that's a real one.
Having to make payroll, you realize people think we're made out of unlimited amount of time, money, and resources, and we're not.
Yeah.
And we're not. Which is what I loved about being on my own, right? And all of a sudden you get a windfall.
Yeah.
What do you do with the money? Do you buy your wife a nice car? And do you put it away for the kids' college? Do you hire somebody else? Do you put it in advertising? Do you just bank it? And the lawyers that I spoke to that had the best track record saying, invest it. I put aside this amount every month for my expenses, for my salary, for what we got to pay. Anything that comes up beyond that, invest it. And those are the lawyers that have been, I think, the most successful. But it's tough because you have these things drawing at you. And that's what I loved about being. It's just like an adventure. When you don't make money, it's an adventure. When you make money, it's even double the adventure. All right, what do I do with this?
Yeah.
But that answers it, yeah.
You want to give any parting, words, advice to guys coming up, kids coming up, guys and gals, and just about, maybe lessons you learned and at this point in your career?
Yes. So my pitch is become involved in a bar association. I started out with the North Hudson Lawyers Club, which is more like a social club, but it got me to know judges and lawyers in the county and that I worked in that I would not know. Then I became involved in the Hudson County Bar Association, and I really started to get to know the lay of the land. You become first name basis with the judges. The state bar, I became involved a little later in my career. I wish I would have been involved earlier because it would have been such a wonderful resource to help me while I was president and in leadership positions of the local bars, because we have great we own the building. We don't own the land. That's leased for like 100 years from Rutgers. But we have all these resources, all these materials, speakers bureau. We have so much help, and people are sort of at wit's end. It's wonderful to be able to tap into that resource. One of the things I loved about being a solo in Hudson is that there's a lot of different solos or small firms. If I had municipal court in Guttenberg and I had a hearing in Union City, I call up, hey, who's in Union City? Boss, can you put this plea through? It was and we're competitors. It was such a wonderful community of lawyers. And I want the state bar to be that, hey, we're your partners here. We have great resources, great things, and it's a chance to lecture, to be on a committee. Again, to put your name out there, because you could be the best lawyer in this field. If you're just doing it and nobody knows about it, nobody finds out.
Awesome. Norberto.
That's my final pitch for the state bar.
Yes.
That's good. State bar.
Now, I feel honored and fortunate for you to come on and spend the time with us today. It was really awesome, so I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you for having me. This podcast stuff I never had a pod. I've been interviewed. I had a testimony at trial. Been deposed, but this is neat. This is a nice forum.
And I'm not going to hit you with a sandbag question, so
That's
you're
good.
good.
He almost hit me with a sandbag.
No.
Thanks so much.
Well, thanks so
you.
much.